Ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 7, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to offer my amendment that utilizes the Holman Rule to reduce the salary of EPA Administrator Michael Reagan to $1. On his watch, Administrator Reagan has used the EPA to impose Green New Deal policies such as electric appliance and EV mandates, power plant closures, strict regulations on American energy production, and environmental justice initiatives. On Michael Reagan's watch, the EPA has prioritized DEI over domestic energy, climate change over consumers, and EVs over our great economy. In a hearing with the Oversight and Accountability Committee, he was unaware that the EPA has never formally been authorized by Congress, something that someone who oversees an agency should know. If the body of government who is directed to create such agencies has never authorized them, well, then we kind of have a problem. But however, this hasn't stopped him from jeopardizing American energy security, overloading America's power grid, and raising costs for all American consumers and businesses. In fact, in March of last year, the EPA Twitter account posted, quote, as a bicultural, bilingual, and bisexual woman, Iris deeply empathizes with communities at the intersection of overlapping crisis of injustice, hashtag climate change, and environmental racism, end quote. We cannot have the head of the Environmental Protection Agency claiming that even the environment is racist. This is, another season of all the questions are made up and none of the points matter. The American people want their government to work for them, not against them. This administration's Green New Deal regulations are increasing regulatory costs at a rate of $617 billion per year of rulemaking. Is that clear? $617 billion in just rulemaking alone. This isn't a bill that Congress is passing. It's just rulemaking by the agency itself. And if they continue at the Obama administration's regulatory pace, this will cost American families $60,000. It's time to put an end to governing by the Green New Deal, which is very much a scam. And the first step is to get rid of Administrator Reagan. I urge the passage of this important amendment. And with that, Madam Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Colorado reserves. Any member wish?
Madam Chairman.
What purpose does the gentleman from
claim
Idaho
time in opposition to the amendment?
Oh, Jesus.
One's recognized for 5 minutes.
I see that we're going to have several Holman rules coming up. When the Holman rule was originally put in place years ago, it was meant to identify people who had committed crimes, and we've had some of those that have been fired. It wasn't meant to identify people who had policy differences. Those are what elections are about. Anybody who suggested that on this side of the aisle that we were going to elect the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, that the policies that they enacted were going to be things we supported, I think we're living in a different world. They're enacting their policy. Instead of doing these types of amendments, and I've opposed every one of them except one, instead of doing these types of amendments, what we need to do is, if we oppose them, get out and elect another president to get the job done. This doesn't do anything. If you could tell me that they had committed some crime, something that they didn't have the authority to do, then maybe we'd consider it. But I noticed on all of these things, there's an awful lot of Holman amendments that are going to be, and I'm only going to speak on one of them. Same message goes out for all of them. That you don't do this because, frankly, I don't think we have the authority to do it, even though the rule of the House says we do. But they are appointed and they are confirmed by the United States Senate. I don't think we have, and this is essentially firing. When you reduce the salary to $1, you're firing the individual. I don't think we have that authority. So unless you can show me that they have done something illegal, high crimes or misdemeanors, something like that, I think this is silly. But we're going to have more of them. That's okay. I just wanted to speak on one of them because I don't want to repeat myself over and over and over again. But it gives the sponsors of these amendments sometimes to complain about what the administration is doing, and that's okay. But I oppose the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Idaho yields back. The gentlewoman from Colorado has 2 minutes remaining, and she's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate my colleague, Mr. Simpson here, who is chair of a subcommittee and approps the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee. I believe that we absolutely have the authority to exercise the Holman Rule. Congress, the House of Representatives, we are a majority rule self-governing body. We have rules that we vote on to put in place that allows us to govern and governs ourselves as members of Congress. We have the Holman Rule to have a check on unelected bureaucrats. I agree with my colleague that elections do matter, that we do need to get out and vote for the best candidate. However, my constituents in Colorado do not have the opportunity to vote for these unelected bureaucrats who are happy to stay in their position and wait out a majority of their disliking, and it is very difficult to remove them. And my colleague is also correct in saying this is essentially a way of firing these unelected bureaucrats who are abusing their position, who are using their power, their job and their position to hurt American citizens when they are creating rulemaking that is $17 billion per year and increasing the household costs of families by $60,000. I don't care if that's technically illegal or legal. It is immoral and it is unjust and it is unsustainable. So I stand by my amendment to reduce the salary of the EPA director, Mr. Reagan, to $1, to exercise our House rule that we have voted on, that Mr. Simpson even voted on in the rules package of January of 2023, and hold this unelected bureaucrat accountable. I am here to represent my constituents and save the American taxpayer money. Madam Chair, I yield.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Madam Chair, I would like to request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 8, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to exercise the rule of the House to offer the Holman Rule amendment here in this appropriations bill. And I rise to offer my amendment that reduces the salary of Melissa Schwartz, Director of Communications of the Department of Interior, to $1. Melissa Schwartz is yet another horrendous and miserable use of taxpayer dollars. Look at this. She is a mask-wearing, quadruple-vaxxed, Green New Deal extremist, and unfortunately, a liberal troll who has harassed me even in committee hearing rooms. She shouldn't be employed at the Department of Interior. Melissa Schwartz belongs under a bridge. Melissa had the nerve and lack of respect to confront me in the halls of Congress following a Department of Interior meeting. In this hearing, she had the audacity to come and personally attack a member of Congress. This DEI hire made clear she doesn't work for the American people, and she is simply another misguided mouthpiece for liberal extremists that hates conservatives and people that disagree with her eccentric views. Rather than focus on agency priorities or the American people's priorities, facts, and seeking to do what's best for America, Schwartz spends most of her taxpayer time tweeting nonsense and trying to promote the Biden regime's radical New Deal scam. Melissa and her colleagues believe that climate change is the ultimate threat to humanity. They are willing to kill American jobs and sacrifice the health of our economy at all costs as they pursue their extremist ideology. I'm committed to taking a stand against the Biden regime's attempt to cripple American energy and cater to radical extremists. I urge my colleagues to exercise our voted on House rule and implement the Holman Rule and support my amendment that reduces the salary of Melissa Schwartz to $1. And with that, Madam Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Colorado reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is petty, punitive. Rather than pursuing grudges against public servants, my colleagues across the aisle should focus their energy on negotiating with the Senate on a bill to fund the government. I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment, and I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Maine reserves. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Madam Chair, I yield.
The gentlewoman from Colorado yields. The gentlewoman from Maine is recognized.
I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed.
Madam Chair.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maine seek recognition?
I request to record a vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 9, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 9, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise today to offer my amendment that utilizes the Holman Rule to reduce the salary of Director of Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Elizabeth Klein, to $1. Ms. Klein is a radical environmentalist and a partisan hack comprised of special interests and mirrored in ethical conflicts. Her conflicts of interest were so severe that even Senator Manchin voted to block her nomination as Deputy Secretary of the Interior. As Deputy Director of the New York University School of Law's State Energy and Environmental Impact Center, Klein placed and paid the salaries of legal fellows and state attorneys general's offices to advance Michael Bloomberg's radical environmental agenda. The use of private money to conduct public business is ethically flawed, and Indiana's Attorney General categorized Ms. Klein's program as a, quote, arrangement through which a private organization or individual can promote an overtly political agenda by paying the salaries of government employees, end quote. In just the first year of the program, SEEIC fellows participated in filing at least 130 regulatory, legal, and other challenges to President Trump's policies. Successful policies, I might add. Now, Ms. Klein is working for the federal government and on the other side of lawsuits that she helped file. Under President Biden's own ethics rules, she should be prohibited from participating in matters involving her former employer. During her testimony in the House Committee on Natural Resources, I questioned Ms. Klein about her failed nomination to become Deputy Secretary of the Interior. I asked if she had been provided with a recusal list and formally requested that she provide that list to the committee. Ms. Klein told the committee that she was, quote, happy to provide that list, end quote. Shamefully, it took a letter from the committee and this aggressive committee questioning for Klein to send the committee a very delayed recusal list that should have been in place almost immediately after her hiring. Ms. Klein spent several years funneling money from Michael Bloomberg to sue the Trump administration and pay for the Green New Deal scam. Lawyers she had placed in attorneys general's offices across the country. Given her myriad of federal lawsuits and conflicts, there should be little to nothing that Ms. Klein is allowed to work on at any sub-agency within the Department of Interior. Senior federal employees are required to be transparent in their ethical obligations and act impartially, placing their sole loyalty to the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America. Ms. Klein's history of infiltrating state governments with Michael Bloomberg's minions and supporting lawsuits against the federal government makes it impossible for her to meet the ethical obligations that her position of public trust requires. Ms. Klein continued employment as the Director of Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and has been ridiculed with controversial and extensive history of ethical conflicts. And this is a stain on the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Radical partisan extremists have no place in the federal government, especially those in charge of our energy security. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to restore integrity to the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Madam Chair, with that, I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment, once again, is petty and punitive. I don't think this is the appropriate place to pursue grudges against public servants, hardworking public servants who we ask to do an extremely important job in Washington. Let me just say this. This is a use of the Holman Amendment in a way to just talk about my colleague on the other side of the aisle's objection to the work that's going on related to climate change. This bill is going to be full of amendments from people who either don't believe in climate change, don't think we should invest in it, aren't willing to think about the future. This is our job, is to make sure that we are protecting the future of this planet, of this country, of our economy, of the people who live in the United States, the future for our children and grandchildren. We're going to hear a litany of opposition through amendments like these, from people who don't believe that we're having the hottest summer on record, who aren't paying attention to the extreme floods, to the storms that are impacting us, to the damage it's already done to the economy, to the billions of dollars we're already spending, who are going to use any means possible to block the work we're doing to fight climate change. I oppose this amendment. I'm going to continue to oppose these amendments that are really just another way to deny that climate change exists and that we have a responsibility to work on it. I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Maine reserves. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized. And she has 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say that I care deeply about our environment. I want clean air. I want clean water. I want to be able to be good stewards of the land that we have been gifted here in the United States of America. And I don't believe that pursuing these extremist Green New Deal scam policies is advancing that agenda that we have. I don't want to spend tax dollars on these initiatives and this purpose. I want to do the work of the people, and I believe that my amendment gets us one step closer to that by reducing the salary of Ms. Klein to $1. Madam Chair, I yield.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Maine is recognized.
Once again, I will say that we're going to have a litany of amendments from people who don't believe in climate change, no matter what they say, no matter how many times people on the other side of the aisle say, oh, no, I really want clean air and clean water, but I don't want to do the hard work that has to be done. And to call these policies extremist, Green New Deal policies is just a way to dismiss that we have a serious problem before us. We have serious work to do. It is our responsibility to protect the planet for future generations, to make sure that we can continue to live and exist on this planet. I reject this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Maine yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment's not agreed to. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
I would like to request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 10, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 10, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Rise to offer my amendment that redirects $2 million to hazardous fuels reduction activities within the Bureau of Land Management to prevent catastrophic wildfires and save lives. The year I was elected, Colorado suffered the worst fire season in Colorado history with the 3 largest recorded wildfires we have ever had. Hundreds of homes were destroyed and evacuated, and Coloradans endured more than 100 days of fire. The Cameron Peak fire burned more than 208,000 acres and more than 460 structures to the tune of $6 million in property losses. The East Troublesome fire on the border of my district killed 2 people. Coloradans also suffered severe health issues resulting from significant smoke from these fires. Wildfire smoke causes serious disorders, including eye and respiratory tract infections, reduced lung function, bronchitis, exacerbation of asthma, and even premature death. Catastrophic wildfires also cause significant damage to the environment. A few years ago, NASA concluded that one catastrophic wildfire can emit more carbon emissions in just a few days than all of the vehicle emissions in an entire state over the course of an entire year. Decades of mismanagement has left our nation's federal lands vulnerable to insects and disease and ripe for catastrophic wildfires. The good news is there is finally significant bipartisan support throughout the country to prevent wildfires, and the Forest Service is seeking to treat 20 million acres of national forests and grasslands and 30 million acres of state, local, and tribal and private lands over the next 10 years. However, we need to do more, as federal agencies have stated that more than 1 billion acres throughout the country are currently at risk of catastrophic wildfires. Our federal lands are overgrown and poorly managed, making them more susceptible to wildfire, disease, and even bark beetle attacks. There are federal lands in Colorado and the West where we once had 50 to 100 trees per acre, but now we see 500 to 1,000 trees per acre, proving the overgrowth of our forests. There are also 6 billion standing dead trees in the western United States. Some people call that a problem. I call it a tinderbox waiting to ignite and burn. Fuels, treatments are effective, and federal agencies have made clear, and I quote, over 90% of the fuel treatments are effective in changing the fire behavior and or helping with control of the wildfire, end quote. Let's put the lives of the American people first, take significant action to benefit our environment by passing my hazardous fuels reduction amendment and redirecting $2 million to these hazardous fuels reductions activities within the Bureau of Land Management, and I encourage the adoption of my amendment. Madam Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Colorado purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, I'm very, very supportive of increasing funding in this important program. And I want to thank the chairman for his work over the years, hard work and bipartisan work in combating wildland fires. But I simply cannot support the offset proposed for this amendment. Funding for the EPA in the base bill is already cut $1.8 billion below the enacted level, and this reduction makes it impossible for the EPA to carry out its mission. We need the worker bees of the EPA to keep the EPA moving forward for the American public. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back my time.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota yields back her time. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Madam Chair, I am proud of my party's work in reducing taxpayer spending by $1.8 billion in this bill. And I also am encouraged to find even more offsets where we can redirect funding and put them to a more appropriate use for the taxpayer, showing that their best interest is what we are all here serving in Washington, D.C. on their behalf for. Madam Chair, again, I support the adoption of my amendment that redirects $2 million for the fuels hazardous management in the Bureau of Land Management. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Colorado yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 11, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 11, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to offer my common sense amendment that redirects $2 million of the Inspector General to combat waste, fraud, and abuse within the EPA. As a proud member of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, I am a firm believer in increasing transparency of federal programs and actions within the executive branch. Honest, hardworking Americans should be able to trust that their tax dollars are being spent responsibly and for their intended purposes. The EPA Office of Inspector General is charged with providing critical oversight over tens of billions of dollars that are spent by the EPA, U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board, as well as more than $100 billion that is being doled out through the so-called Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the so-called Inflation Reduction Act that we all know did nothing to reduce inflation. Ask anyone you meet in a grocery store. Unlike other Inspector General offices, the EPA IG did not receive additional funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, Expansion Act, to carry out the additional oversight mandates associated with this law. Oversight by the IG is critical to ensure that the EPA, as well as its grantees and contractors, are responsible stewards of scarce American tax dollars. The IG also seeks to root out fraud, waste, and abuse, mismanagement, and misconduct within the agencies it provides oversight to. Recently, the IG identified significant taxpayer risks and vulnerabilities that are associated with the administration's Clean School Bus program. Sounds great, right? The Inspector General pointed out, and I quote, "There is a high potential for, among other things, falsely substituting or duplicating requests from multiple federal agencies for the same or very similar materials and associated labor," end quote. Ever since the passage of the Inspector General Act in 1978, Inspectors General has uncovered billions of dollars of fraud and exposed numerous instances of criminal wrongdoing. The EPA IG is no exception. During the first half of the fiscal year of 2023, the EPA IG identified $135 million in wasted spending, fraud avoidance, and other monetary benefits to American taxpayers. However, vigilance by the EPA Inspector General is needed now more than ever for the more than $100 billion of Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act that have been distributed and are still going out the door. Funding currently allocated in this bill for the EPA IG is significantly below the budget estimate, yet they are being asked to do significantly more. My common sense amendment will help ensure that the Inspector General has the funding and resources they need to provide strict oversight of the EPA. I have found a pay for, so this is not deficit spending. We are not wasting taxpayer dollars. We are redirecting these $2 million, and I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to redirect important resources to the Inspector General. Madam Chair, without a reserve.
A gentleman from Colorado reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, to be clear, I fully support the oversight efforts and believe in the mission of the Inspector General's office across this government. It's vital. When I was former chair of this committee, I supported their work. I supported their work as the former chair of the Defense Subcommittee and as ranking member. But I have to strongly disagree with the offset and the treatment of the EPA in this bill in general. In base bill, the EPA is cut by nearly 20%. Almost every single account is cut except for the Office of the Inspector General. So quite frankly, the Inspector General's office does pretty well under this bill being protected. Cutting every single program at the EPA and seeking to increase funding for only one office, which happens to be the Oversight Office, is clearly an attempt by the majority to politicize the Inspector General, and that to me is just unacceptable, Madam Chair. So I oppose the amendment, and before I reserve the balance of my time, I require how much time is left, if I could ask that of you.
The gentlewoman has 4 minutes remaining.
And the gentlewoman offering the amendment?
Gentlewoman from Colorado has 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from Minnesota reserves. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to yield the remainder of my time to my colleague, Mr. Simpson.
The gentleman from Idaho is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for yielding. I rise in support of this amendment to provide additional funding for the EPA Office of Inspector General to conduct important and necessary oversight agencies. I've spoken with several of the Inspector Generals that have said that with all of the funding that went out last year, funding that went out to the EPA and to other things, they don't have enough money to do the oversight to make sure that the money that was spent in the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, and other things are properly spent. And so that they've asked us, actually, and several of my colleagues on this side of the aisle, Mrs. Boebert and Mrs. Bice, have also suggested that we need more money in the Inspector General's accounts. So I'm supporting this amendment, and I hope my colleagues will also.
Say that again. The gentlewoman from Colorado yield back.
I yield.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I appreciate Chairman Simpson's remarks, but I would like to correct a point that was made earlier in the debate. The bill already does include a provision to provide the IG, with a percentage of funds from the IRA. And it's on page 216 is section 471. So the gentlewoman might want to double check before making such a broad statement again that it didn't include any funding that could be used from the IRA. So I still oppose the amendment. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 13, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 13, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From day one of this regime, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris declared an all-out war on American energy production and exploration. They have made very clear that they care more about appeasing the radical climate change activists than protecting the millions of oil and gas workers and producers in America. I was disappointed but not surprised when the Biden regime finalized the rule entitled Fluid Mineral Lease and Leasing Process, which mandates provisions from the partisan so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which increased the royalty rate for production on federal lands while also increasing and creating new fees for domestic energy producers. This new fluid mineral leasing rule is further proof that the Biden-Harris regime is using every tool in their administration to dismantle American energy production. It increases bonding levels for production on federal lands and proposes ending nationwide bonding and increasing the minimum bond amounts for individual lease bonds and statewide lease bonds from $10,000 to $150,000 and from $25,000 to $500,000, respectively. This significant increase will tie up capital that would otherwise be put back into production and is unjustifiable as there are only 37 orphaned oil and gas wells on BLM-managed lands. These increases will impact smaller producers who can't afford to operate in the market. These additional fees will ultimately harm returns and reduce revenues to state and local governments by disincentivizing development on federal lands. The rule also introduces the idea of using preference criteria to inform the BLM selection of lands for lease sales. BLM's rationale for this change is to avoid conflict in areas, quote, with sensitive cultural, wildlife, and recreation resources, end quote. This means that BLM field offices could avoid leasing in all areas with endangered or threatened species, critical habitat, or nearby recreation areas, a move that would greatly limit leasing on our federal lands. With the wars happening in the Middle East and in Europe, and with OPEC significantly lowering oil production, we cannot rely on other foreign nations to control our energy supply. America makes the cleanest energy in the world. We do it the most responsibly. American innovation, in particular fracking, has allowed America to be the global leader in reducing emissions since the year 2000. We need to stop buying oil and gas from Russia, stop begging OPEC, Venezuela, and Iran to produce energy for us, and start producing more energy responsibly here in America. I am ready to bring back the American roughneck and to drill, baby, drill, because no one does it better than we do here in the United States of America. We must restore American energy dominance and produce clean, reliable energy right here in America. Mr. Chair, I urge the adoption of my amendment, and I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves.
Mr. Chair, I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
And first and foremost, I do not believe that the United States government purchases oil from Russia. We have sanctions against them, and we do not purchase oil from Iran. Mr. Chair, this amendment is one more controversial poison pill writer that sadly shows the extremist Republicans are not interested in bills that can gain bipartisan support and become law. The Fluid Mineral Lease and Leasing Program rules revises outdated. These haven't been updated for years, and it's our responsibility to make sure the taxpayers get a good return on our natural resources when they're put out to lease. So what this tries to do is just update these outdated fiscal terms on offshore leases, oil, gas program, including bonding requirements to protect taxpayers, royalty rates, and minimum bids to make sure that U.S. taxpayers receive a fair amount for their public lands when they're used as lease materials. The rule aims to increase the returns to the American taxpayers. I can't say this enough. It's to make sure that taxpayers are getting a fair shake, that they're assured of a fair return from the extraction of natural resources on public lands, and to discourage speculators and improve responsible stewardship as directed by Congress. Now, we're here to protect the cultural and natural resources of our public lands for future generations. And that means when they go out to bid, that we make sure that the royalty rates and the minimum bids serve the taxpayers well, and bonding requirements to protect taxpayers are put in place. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I would like to yield the remainder of my time to my colleague, Mr. Simpson from Idaho.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the lady for yielding. I rise in support of the amendment. This administration continues to put out rulemakings that seek to attack American energy producers with burdensome costs and regulations. These new costs will ultimately be passed along to consumers, driving up energy costs for American families and further shifting production to countries that are not our friends. We must utilize an all-of-the-above energy approach to energy production and stop hampering domestic energy production. It would be interesting to note that in the year 2020, we were actually energy independent in this country. We are no longer. And yet we have the energy here in this country, but we refuse to use it. Therefore, I support the gentlewoman's amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentlelady is recognized.
I would like to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves.
Mr. Chair, I yield.
Mr. Chair, I want to state another fact for the record. When we extract oil and natural gas out of public lands, it's sold on a global market. So when it's sold to other folks. So if we're running into energy independence challenges, as was pointed out, part of that's because it's sold on the global market. I also want to point out for the record, it's been almost 4 decades, since the taxpayers have had bonding requirements, royalty rates, and minimum bids looked at to make sure that they're protected. Let me close with this. Once again, my Republican colleagues are disregarding the law and trying to circumvent rigorous practices to put the rules up to date and nullify public comments also happens with this amendment. We just can't close our eyes to the impacts of climate change that we're experiencing as our country, our health, our livelihoods, food security, and quality of life all depend upon a healthy ecosystem. And I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment and focus instead on addressing climate change and being good stewards of our public lands and resources for the benefits of future generations. And that means refreshing and updating almost 40-year-old oil, gas, and mineral leasing. With that, I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 14, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 14, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment that prohibits funds made available by this act to be used for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Accessibility Council at the Department of the Interior. In February of 2022, Secretary Holland established the first ever Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Council through Secretary's Order 3406 to incorporate these practices into the department's work across many bureaus. Let's be honest here. The DEI agenda is a destructive ideology that breeds hatred and racial division. It has no place in our federal government or anywhere else in our society. DEI exists to be a jobs program for otherwise unemployable holders of gender studies degrees who ruin just about everything they touch. Since taking office, the Biden-Harris regime has implemented DEI policies across virtually every agency in the federal government. The DEI is focused on coddling unequipped and incompetent employees, and I think we've seen that by all of the resignations from these DEI hires in this administration in just a few short years. As we saw a mere 11 days ago, DEI hires and incompetency at Secret Service were responsible for letting a deranged gunman come centimeters from killing President Trump. And I'm not talking about the folks who were there, boots on the ground. I'm talking about the disgraced director of the Secret Service who resigned today after scrutiny from both Republicans and Democrats, and those all throughout our country. Mr. Chair, we should no longer allow DEI in the federal government to continue to divide America and waste taxpayer money. It's absurd to fund these diverse policies, and it's time for Congress to put an end to them once and for all. The Department of Interior should be focused on restoring American energy dominance, not pandering to radical leftists. This is not about race or gender or anything else included in the DEI agenda of the left. This is about having the best, most equipped, most qualified personnel in their positions, no matter what their race or gender are. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to abolish this demonizing DEI council. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman is recognized. For what purpose does the gentlewoman
Still
seek
from
recognition?
Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wrong in the strongest opposition possible to this amendment. One of our greatest strengths as a nation is we learn, we grow, we change. And that means diversity is a great strength in this country. There was a time, Mr. Chair, when women couldn't vote. There was a time when juries were only men. There was a time when it was unthinkable for a woman to join a police department, or a woman to be a doctor. The place was to be a nurse. There was a time in our military in which women could be test pilots here at home during the war. And after the war, they were no longer allowed to be pilots in the sky flying commercially. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. The American experience is not a singular experience, and diversity programs exist to recognize this. I'm going to give another example, Mr. Chair. When I was in the state legislature in Minnesota, we had a vibrant Hmong community that came here after the Lao war in Vietnam. It was a secret war in Laos. And the Hmong community came here, and they were very outdoors people. And, understanding and making sure that they understood our natural resource laws, we decided we wanted to reach out and include that diversity. And so we went out, and I was part of the legislation that was written, that we asked our Natural Resources Department to hire, to look for qualified people, hires Vietnamese, Lao, Cambodian people to work with our wonderful diverse community in the Twin Cities and have them feel included and wanted because we wanted them to experience the great outdoors in Minnesota. Well, we did that. They were well qualified, well respected, and in fact, just this year, I was surprised. One of the fathers came up to me when I was doing my recruitment and acceptance for going into the military academy, and he said, "You don't remember me, but because of you, I felt like I could do this job, and I did it well." And he retired from the state of Minnesota, working for the Department of Natural Resources, and I appointed his son to go to one of our military academies. And that's the beauty of our country. And the fact is also that business leaders agree that having a diverse and inclusive workforce in the place is critical to their overall performance, because I was in sales for years. If you're selling to somebody, you better understand their culture, you better understand their needs and their wants. So the business community embraces this. So the attempt to defund or to block the implementation of these efforts only takes us back to a time when our nation's diversity, when women were not seen as an asset. So I oppose this amendment, and Mr. Chair, I'm not going to speak on this any longer. This has been replayed over and over and over again, and for me, it is hateful, it is hurtful, it is harmful. We amended our Constitution numerous times to include diversity and inclusion, and with that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chair, may I inquire as to how much time I have remaining?
The gentlewoman has 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. America is great, and we're going to make America even greater in the upcoming months and years. America is diverse. America is the great melting pot of the world. We have some of the world's best, the world's finest. And you know, it's amazing. All it took were people coming together to adopt the 19th Amendment, to allow women to vote. It took people coming together and collaborating to hire women as police officers or firefighters or pilots. Heck, I've flown a plane. Little Husky 180. Great time. Enjoying the sights of Colorado and all of the mountainsides. You know, we have an economy right now that is failing because we have a party and an administration that is prioritizing DEI, something we didn't need to have women as police officers or firefighters or pilots or service members, those who would offer up their own lives to serve in the honor of our great country, who would stand for our flag. And because of DEI and this administration's woke agenda and their radical views, we have now been regulated into poverty. I remember a time also where women could, if they chose, stay home and raise their children. And now women are forced to work and have homes with 2 incomes because they cannot afford their groceries or their gasoline to get their children to school. And it's all because of the policies of this radical agenda. I'm fine with diversity. America is known for being a welcoming country. But this DEI program isn't what makes America great, and we never needed it to be great. And I'm calling for it to come to an end. I yield.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 15, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 15, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment to prohibit funding for the, ready, bicycle subsidy benefit program at the Department of the Interior. The DOI Bicycle Subsidy Benefit Program provides taxpayer dollars to DOI employees and paid student interns and/or unpaid student volunteers for the purchase, improvements, repair, storage, and/or maintenance of a non-motorized bicycle that is used as a primary means of commuting to and from work, as well as a monthly stipend. Welcome to the federal government. American taxpayers' hard-earned money is being wasted on covering bicycle commuting expenses such as bicycles, bicycle locks, bicycle parking, storage, bicycle safety equipment, bicycle improvements, or accessories including reflective lights, racks, bicycle repairs, and general maintenance, personal safety and protective equipment, including high visible safety apparel, headwear, and bicycle gloves, and bicycle share memberships, as well as getting paid to bike to work. Praise the Lord. Coloradans across my district are struggling right now. They're hurting. The economy is bad, inflation is high, the policies are ruining their lives that are brought by the Biden-Harris administration. They are struggling right now as they deal with the disastrous effects of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's destructive economic policies. We must redirect our attention and their money to much more important things than subsidizing employees for riding bicycles. The Biden administration has unleashed record inflation on Americans that has decimated our bank and retirement accounts, increased gas prices to record levels, raised utility bills, drove up grocery costs, and made it harder to live for the American people. The primary root cause of this record-breaking inflation was trillions of dollars of wasteful federal spending. This excessive spending has real-life consequences that the people I represent are experiencing every single day. American families will pay a $8,581 inflation tax over the next year. They didn't vote for that, but unfortunately, too many elected officials did. Currently, 20 million Americans cannot pay their electric bill. We have seen a 4.3% decline in real wages since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris entered the White House. Americans have lost more than $2 trillion in retirement savings they have worked their lives for. America is $35 trillion in debt, and Democrats want us to continue to print money and pay bureaucrats to bike to work when our commander-in-chief himself cannot even ride a bike. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to cut wasteful, silly federal spending by prohibiting funding for the Bicycle Subsidy Benefit Program at the Department of the Interior. Mr. Chair, I sure do hope we can get this one through. I reserve.
Yeah, members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I claim time in opposition.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
The amendment would block the Department of Interior from its bicycle subsidy benefit program, which encourages federal employees to use bicycles to commute to the office. And we all know what the traffic's going to be like here tomorrow. Bikes would be handy. The department created this program in response to a 1993, this is not a new President Biden, Vice President Harris program, 1993. It's been around since 1993. And Congress authorized it. And Congress allowed each agency head to establish a program to encourage employees to use the means other than single occupancy motor vehicles to commute to and from work. So that could include taking the subway, taking the bus, or riding your bike. This is a government-wide program, and blocking the amendment unfairly targets the Interior Department employees. So I urge my colleagues to treat all employees with fairness. And let's reject this amendment, and let's also make sure that when we're talking about it, we have our facts accurate. 1993, Congress made a law which authorized each agency to establish this program. And with that, I yield back.
Reserves. The yield's back. Gentlewoman from Colorado.
Mr. Chair, I yield.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 16, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 16, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment that prohibits the Bureau of Land Management from taking any action to finalize, implement, or enforce a draft resource management plan and draft supplemental environmental impact statement to end new oil leases on 1.6 million acres in Colorado. Colorado's West Slope used to have a booming energy production economy. I remember because the Roughnecks used to come into my restaurant. They would patronize my business and businesses all around us. And I knew we were having a really good day by the amount of mud we had to clean up off of the floor from their boots after working hard all day in the field to earn a living for their family and produce good, clean energy for us, not just in Colorado and America, but throughout the world. There used to be 112 drilling rigs on the West Slope, but now we have 4 rigs. Now, not in my backyard extremists and job-killing federal policies have driven away those good-paying jobs. Those good-paying jobs that also supported local businesses. The Bureau of Land Management's draft resource management plan for the Colorado River Valley Field Office and Grand Junction Field Office is the latest fossil fuels attack. This proposed land grab could remove over 1.6 million acres of public lands in Colorado from future oil and gas leasing and establish 9 different areas of critical environment concern on over 100,000 acres of BLM land. If this proposal is finalized, the United States will lose access to vital energy resources, many more than the 600 fewer wells projected by the agency to be lost by 2043. The consequences will be felt far beyond the state of Colorado, where residents will lose their livelihoods and see increased gas and energy prices. Yes, even more than the increases we are seeing today. BLM is proposing to close all areas with no known low and moderate oil and gas development potential and is basing its analysis off the oil and gas potential on out-of-date information that does not take into consideration modern technology. The Permian Basin was once thought to be low to medium, and now it's the highest producing oil field in the world. As a result, the Permian Basin would be closed if this proposal had been in place in New Mexico and Texas prior to the significant amount of production that is now occurring. This proposed land grab is nothing short of partisan politics meant to further restrict access to the oil and natural gas development that could reinvigorate the economy of the West Slope of Colorado and help ensure energy security for all Americans. There are already stringent standards and requirements in place for oil and gas producers that aim at reducing environmental and cultural impacts. This proposed rule is yet another blatant land grab disguised to dismantle the fossil fuel industry and force a green transition, closing the door to over 1.6 million acres of vital public lands for energy development is not just an issue of economics, it's a threat to our nation's energy independence and security. This proposal goes beyond necessary environmental considerations and instead seeks to restrict access to promising resources, hindering the potential of economic growth and prosperity, particularly in the West Slope of Colorado, where we have been regulated into poverty thanks to the Biden-Harris administration. Rogue bureaucrats at the BLM shouldn't be unilaterally locking up more land in Colorado. It's urgent that we block this overreach and prioritize responsible energy production that will help reduce gas prices during these challenging times. Mr. Chair, I yield. I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. Does any member seek time in opposition? For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I claim time in opposition to this amendment. This amendment is one more controversial poison pill policy that sadly shows that extremist Republicans are not interested in bills that can gain bipartisan support and become law. In accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act and the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, the BLM drafted the proposed Draft Resource Management Plan and Draft Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement for the Colorado River Valley Field Office and Grand Junction Field Office. This plan is an updated, comprehensive, and environmentally advocate framework for managing uses of these public lands and resources. Sadly, this amendment seeks to block that plan. We are here to protect the welfare of the American public and preserve our public lands and resources for future generations. Once again, my Republican colleagues are disregarding the law and trying to circumvent the rigorous process that is in place to update resource management plans. The amendment also nullifies the public comments that have been collected by legislating the outcome. We cannot close our eyes to the impacts of climate change we are experiencing as our economy, health, livelihoods, food security, and quality of life all depend on healthy ecosystems. I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment, focus instead on addressing climate change and being good stewards of our public lands and resources for the benefit of future generations. I reserve my time.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Chair, on behalf of Coloradans, I'm here to say end the land grabs, bring back the American roughneck, and drill, baby, drill. I urge the adoption of my amendment, and I yield.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentlewoman from Maine is recognized.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say one thing about my colleague's amendment. She's making the case for the fact that we have to continue to drill for oil or natural gas in Colorado. And I understand the concerns that people have when the economy changes. I can imagine how difficult it is when people have to look at new opportunities as opposed to continuing the careers that they've always done. But the reason we're here addressing this, the reason any changes would be made at a federal level are because we're facing catastrophic climate change. The scientists have told us we have no time left to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel, and yet my colleague is talking about how we have to bring more fossil fuels back into our energy stream. We've made incredible strides with solar power, wind power, all of the renewable energy we're investing in today. She talks about her role to protect Colorado. Well, my role is to protect the state of Maine. I invite you to come and visit anytime. The ocean in Maine is warming at a rate 99% faster than the oceans around the world. I talked to a fisherman this weekend when I was home, and I asked him how fishing was going this summer as the weather has warmed up, as the ocean has warmed up. And we're seeing a serious depletion in the fishing stocks. They can't survive in warmer waters. They migrate to colder waters. They devastate the economy of our fishermen. So if you want to preserve the economy in your state, it's important that you think about renewable energy and ways to make sure that we can support an energy future that works for all of us, not just for your own state's needs. I yield back my time.
The gentlewoman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes definitely have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 17, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 17, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment that prohibits made available by this act from funds made available by this act from being used to declare a national monument with the use of the Antiquities Act in Montrose, Mesa, Montezuma, San Juan, and Dolores counties in western Colorado. Green New Scam extremists in Colorado have been petitioning Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to use the Antiquities Act to designate a roughly 400,000-acre Dolores River Canyon County National Monument. The proposed designation of the Dolores River as a national monument threatens to impose severe economic hardships on the communities in western Colorado. This unilateral land grab will cancel all mining in the uranium-rich area, end hunting and cattle grazing, and curtail motorized travel. These are practices that have been part of the Western way of life for generations. The Biden-Harris regime is no stranger to abusing the Antiquities Act. A little over a year ago, they locked up over 225,000 acres in Colorado with the stroke of a pen and prevented Colorados from using our public lands for activities that we want and need. This is a right of Coloradans and Americans just taken away. Taking even more federal lands off the table for multiple use is attacking American energy production, American jobs, American workers, and leaving American consumers to pay the tab. This amendment ensures Joe Biden and Kamala Harris cannot lock up land by executive fiat and encourages the administration to look for stakeholder-supportive solutions like my bipartisan, bicameral Dolores River National Conservation Area and Special Management Act. This is something I worked with my Colorado senators on. We found a way to compromise without compromising our principles. We came to a place of agreement. The Dolores NCA seeks to designate the Dolores River corridor for the best preservation, benefit, and access of the majority. It is the result of over a decade of community engagement between rafters, agriculture producers, outdoor enthusiasts, water rights stakeholders, conservationists, miners, loggers, business owners, and all the impacted local governments and tribes. Disregarding the agreements achieved and the significant time invested in the Dolores NCA would be an absolute insult to citizens of Southwest Colorado and would contradict DOI's own description of the Antiquities Act, which states, quote, the administration consistently strives to take into account the interests of these wide-range stakeholders, end quote. This proposed national monument designation has the potential to restrict access and land use in ways that threaten and subvert the will of the people in Colorado. I have constituents on the ground daily fighting this proposal, and I am here on their behalf to bring an end to it once and for all through the position that they've elected me to, and I urge adoption of my amendment. Mr. Chair, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment would prohibit the use of any federal funds to create national monuments under the Antiquities Act of 1906 in Montrose County, Mesa County, Montezuma County, San Juan County, or Dolores County in Colorado. The Antiquities Act provides the President with the authority to designate national monuments in order to protect objects of historic or scientific interest. This amendment inappropriately restricts the President's ability to declare national monuments in specific parts of the country. Both Republican and Democratic presidents have used this authority to increase the protection of special federal lands. It goes against 100 years of American tradition to protect the nation's cultural and national resources. The Antiquities Act represents an important achievement in the progress of conservation and preservation efforts in the United States, and Congress should not stand in the way of these achievements. I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. Gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Chair, the gentlewoman from Maine recently said that it is her priority to focus on Maine and I should focus on Colorado. Well, here we are with an amendment related to my home state of Colorado, and I'm here to protect my constituents and our land from another land grab from the Biden-Harris administration. The gentlewoman from Maine has complained of concerns that she has with so-called climate changes and warming of the water, and if that is the main concern, then perhaps the gentlewoman from Maine would like to partner with me from ending energy production in China, who has the worst regulations and emits the most emissions of any place in the world, and stop buying solar panels from China, where they're using child and slave labor in mines in the Congo, and work to partner with me for better American energy production. It's more reliable, it's more efficient, it's cleaner, we're creating jobs, and in the meantime, I'll stick right here to Colorado with this amendment, and the gentlewoman from Maine can focus on Maine as she said she would prefer to do. Mr. Chair, I urge the adoption of my amendment, and I yield.
The gentlewoman yields. Gentlewoman from Maine is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just reiterate once again, climate change is a serious issue. It's something to debate with facts and actual information, not just sort of speculation or things you hear on the internet. One of the reasons we passed the Inflation Reduction Act is to bring some of the manufacturing for renewable energy back into the United States, and I strongly support that. I support all countries making a serious effort to reduce their investment in fossil fuel, their dependence on fossil fuel. That's what we were debating in the last amendment. This is about national monuments, and again, I will reiterate that national monuments and the designation of them has been an important tool for presidents of both parties, and we should not be doing anything that diminishes that opportunities for an administration. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 18, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 18, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment to prohibit funds from being used for the EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The Inflation Reduction Act, which should have been more accurately named the Green New Deal in disguise, established a taxpayer-funded $27 billion slush fund that sends taxpayer dollars to far-left political organizations and their favorite, the Chinese Communist Party. This green bank is nearly 3 times more than the EPA's entire FY23 appropriated funds. Eliminating this slush fund will reduce the budget deficit, protect the government against corruption, and stop China from receiving our taxpayer dollars. When asked during a committee hearing if the EPA could guarantee that none of the funds from this green bank slush fund would go to China, the EPA official in charge of overseeing how funds were spent literally stated, quote, "It's a little more complicated," end quote. He didn't say yes or no. It's a little more complicated. Over 20 million Americans are currently behind on their utility bills. The American people are not begging for more electric vehicles or solar panels. They are asking for lower energy costs. In fact, the world is demanding it of us because we could literally export freedom to our allies across the globe if we were to export our liquefied natural gas rather than purchase energy from our enemies. If Democrats wanted to do something about the current energy crisis, rather than pandering to radical environmental extremists, they would unleash American energy instead of forcing us to use inadequate and unreliable green energy. These policies will not only fail to meet our economy's energy needs, but they will also make America reliant on wind turbines and solar panels that are made in China. America is an energy superpower. We should use our vast resources to restore our economy's vitality, ensure our national security, and put hardworking Americans back to work. I urge the passage of my common sense amendment to put an end to the Biden-Harris regime's pandering to the CCP. And Mr. Chair, I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment, again, is purely an anti-climate messaging amendment. It prohibits funds for Section 134 of the Clean Air Act, which is better known as the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a $27 billion investment to mobilize financing and private capital to address the climate crisis, ensure our country's economic competitiveness, and promote energy independence. I need to note that all $27 billion of those dollars are mandatory spending. This bill does not contain any funding for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So the effort or the effect of this amendment is nothing more than anti-climate rhetoric. We are here to protect the welfare of the American public, and we cannot close our eyes to the impact of climate change. We need to make smart investments that will result in more resilient communities, mitigate the impacts of climate change, and protect our world for future generations. I oppose this amendment, and I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. Gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I yield.
Gentlewoman from Colorado yields.
Yield back.
Gentlewoman from Maine yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Nice. Mr. Chair, I request a recorded vote.
Gentlewoman, pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 8, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. Thanks for that. It is now in order to consider amendment number 19, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 19, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment that utilizes the Holman Rule to reduce the salary of Secretary Deb Holland to $1. Under Holland's leadership, the Department of the Interior has shut down pipelines, delayed federally mandated onshore and offshore leases, repealed common sense streamlining regulations, shuttered mining projects, failed to comply with numerous laws, and so much more. She also has quite a history of conflicts of interest. Under Holland's leadership, DOI has cultivated close and potentially improper relationships with extreme environmental activist groups, many of whom who are working overtime to drive the Biden-Harris administration's social and environmental justice agenda. Her daughter is a member of the Pueblo Action Alliance, which opposes all oil and gas production on federal lands, advocates for the dismantling of America's economic and political system, and believes America is irredeemable because there is no, quote, opportunity to reform a system that isn't founded on good morals or values, end quote. Holland's daughter even engaged in a violent protest with 100 or more protesters breaking through police barriers and trying to get into the Department of the Interior's building. She just want to hug her mom? Or was this a real act of violence with intent? Despite multiple attempts from this institution to do its constitutional duty and provide congressional oversight, the Department of the Interior has failed to respond to 80% of the requests from Congress. I would be remiss to not mention Holland's all-out war on American energy production, from canceling the Keystone XL pipeline on day one, imposing new rules to block pipeline projects, canceling oil and gas leases on millions of acres in Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico, suspending oil drilling leases in a small sliver of Anwar, even though Congress passed a law for this very purpose, imposing a moratorium on new federal oil and gas leases through federal lands, failing to meet the statutory deadlines for quarterly lease sales, and taking countless of other anti-energy measures that have contributed to gas prices and inflation reaching record levels. We need to make America energy dominant once and for all. It's time for us to have energy security, and it's clear that it won't happen with Holland leading the Department of Interior. Mr. Chair, I urge the adoption of this important amendment, and I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I oppose this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. Gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I yield.
Gentlewoman yields. The question on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 20, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
I guess for you. For you? Yeah. Sorry. I have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chair.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 20, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-602, offered by Ms. Boebert of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise to offer my amendment that utilizes the Holman Rule to reduce the salary of BLM Director Tracy Stone Manning to $1. Mr. Chair, let's call a spade a spade. Tracy Stone Manning is a terrorist, and her terrorist booby traps still threaten lives of foresters and firefighters to this very day. Tree spiking Tracy's abysmal record as BLM director has included radical anti-energy activism, engagement in eco-terrorism, failure to carry out laws, and prioritization of climate initiatives and public land grabs over domestic energy production. Tracy Stone Manning is a radicalized environmental terrorist whose repugnant philosophy includes tenets such as, quote, "We must breed fewer consuming humans," end quote. Children are, quote, "environmental hazards," end quote. Ranchers are, quote, "destroying the West," end quote. And, quote, "the solution to houses threatened by wildfires is to let them burn," end quote. Her hateful language spilled over into eco-terrorism when she became involved in a tree-spiking attack threatening the lives of wildland firefighters, foresters, and mill workers in Idaho. Stone Manning's extremist anti-government, pro-population control, anti-law enforcement, pro-wildlife, tree-worshiping, anti-farmer, and anti-responsible energy views should have been more than enough to prevent her from getting to this position. But her involvement in an eco-terrorist tree-spiking attack threatening the lives of wildland firefighters, loggers, and mill workers is beyond the pale. She also perjured herself to Congress when she lied twice to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. The first lie was that she denied ever being investigated by U.S. special agents, and the second lie was that she denied participating in tree spiking. She belongs not in the Department of Interior, but in federal prison. Mr. Chair, Tracy Stone Manning, tree spiking Manning, has got to go. And I urge the passage of this amendment as lives are still at risk for her eco-terrorism today. I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I oppose this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. Gentlewoman from Colorado. The gentlewoman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 21, printed in Part B of House Report 118-602. For what purpose is the gentleman